I'm Tom Johnson, Thomas Johnson Antique Furniture Restoration in Gorham, Maine. There's a popular TV show from Britain called The Repair Shop. And that title, it's a very good show, and that title reminds me of the original intent of my video channel. I wanted to show an actual repair shop. I never went looking for pieces from which we could make the popular trash to treasure type videos. I wanted actual customers bringing in actual pieces of furniture that they used every day and loved and simply needed to be repaired. I give a lot of credit to Trina of John's Furniture Repair and Scott of Fixing Furniture for doing the same thing. The vast majority of the pieces I work on do not have a high market value. In fact, I've never met anyone who has a piece of furniture in their house simply because it's valuable. The driving forces behind this business are practicality and sentimental value. Two of the pieces you're about to see are antiques, or what I call everyday antiques. In other words, people actually use these pieces of furniture. And of course, I'll repair anything. It doesn't have to be old, as you'll see with this beautiful set of Thomas Moser chairs that came in for a 30-year tune-up. So enjoy the videos, like, share, subscribe. Thank you. These are 4 Thomas Moser chairs. Thomas Moser's a well-known furniture maker here in Maine. These chairs were built in 1982 while they still had their workshop in New Gloucester, Maine. You can see that they're even signed on the bottom. And they're in pretty good shape. Generally speaking, they've been in continuous use since 1982. They just need to be cleaned up and re-oiled. There's a few loose legs here and there. And then on 2 of the chairs, this is the worst one. When the owner was cleaning them, it left some really bad marks over here. So we sort of got to give these, not just re-oiling, but I've got to clean them down and get rid of these black marks. So sort of refinish them. They also have damage where the finish is worn away to the bottom of the legs and stuff. This is just normal wear and tear, and I want to bring them back. All right, the first step is going to be to do any gluing that's necessary. On this chair, both front legs are loose. You can see it moving around there. And even though they're wedged through the top, I was hoping to push these straight through so I could re-glue them. But I noticed immediately on the bottom here, they look like they're pinned. I don't know if what I'm looking at is a dowel that goes through that leg that was then cut off, or if that's a plug. So I'm going to poke around it a little bit and see what it is. Luckily that is a plug, I believe, not a dowel. No, I don't think it's a. I think it's a dowel. I thought maybe it was holding a small screw, but it's a dowel that goes into that leg. See how that dowel's moving right there? So it may be, if I hit this from the other side, we can break that. Let's see. You know, I realized, looking at the way these legs are pinned, and you can see this pin, which looks like a 3/16 dowel, is moving with the leg. I began to realize if I try to push that leg through, I'm going to split all this wood out where it's so thin here at the bottom of the chair. So I think what I want to try on these chairs is a glue that's designed to penetrate joints and tighten them up without disassembly. I usually like to disassemble pieces, but if it's going to damage the chair to disassemble it, it's worth it to try to use the penetrating adhesive. When this chair is sitting on its 4 legs, it's pushing the front legs up through the seat. So I want to bring those back down where they belong when I glue it. So I'm going to lay it on its back. Okay, once the legs are secured, the next step is just to wash these down. I assume these chairs had an oil finish, so I'm just going to use a dishwashing liquid, one that's particularly known for cutting oil and grease, and I'll just clean them. All right, I've cleaned these down with the dishwasher detergent. It worked really well. They took the finish right off, right down to the bare wood. Now I'm going to go over it with a mild solution of oxalic acid. There's still grayness where people's hands were, and in a couple places on these chairs there's a lot of gray damage where some metal came in contact with them. So I'm just going to mix up some oxalic acid and hot water. Okay, for this I'm just going to use hot water out of the tap. You can see how the oxalic is brightening up the wood a little bit in areas that didn't seem to come completely clean. There's still a little bit of grayness. I think the dishwash will do the trick. Okay, so I've sanded the chairs with 150 and then really well with 220. And they feel great, they look great, they're ready for the first coat of tung oil. Okay, so this is completely coated. I'll set it aside and start on the other chairs, but I'll keep coming back to this, just keeping it wet. Let that first coat really soak in. Okay, I've got all 4 chairs. They've been soaking for about a half an hour now, and I'm going to wipe them off. I'm using a knit rag, kind of making it into a pad here, and just wiping them down, and it seems to be leaving a nice coat. I'm sure it's going to soak in some more. Okay, I've let these chairs dry now for a few days. We got 2 coats on them, and they look great, and I think I can do the final coat. I'm going to do that with a satin tung oil and with steel wool to smooth it out, and then pat it off with a rag. I'm just patting this, keeping a slight pressure, and the rag seems to glide right across it. I think this all looks really good now. I'm going to save the seat for last. I'm going to do the legs next. All right, now the seat. Okay, so I'll let that dry overnight. Okay, this third coat is dried overnight. They look really good. They can almost go the way they are now, but just to make them super smooth and super nice, I'm going to go over them with some 4-0 steel wool and my beeswax and orange oil polish. And I'm not applying a lot of pressure, just very, very gently. And then I'll ask the owners of these chairs to continue using this polish. All right, they're ready to go. These Thomas Moser chairs were built in 1982. They're 34 years old. They've been in continuous use, so they really weren't in bad shape considering. They just needed a little re-gluing, and then it was time to clean and revive the finish. I think they look pretty good. I'm Tom Johnson, Thomas Johnson Antique Furniture Restoration in Gorham, Maine. This is a very nice tilt-top table, curly maple. A pipe burst in a house and it was damaged in the ensuing flood. You can see there's all kinds of plaster all over it. This appears to be a very old table. This style of table would be called a Chippendale table from the 18th century. I don't see any reason to think that this couldn't be that old. The way the edge is carved, and also the construction of the table. The legs are attached with sliding dovetails. But also there's this very old piece of metal that I call a spider. And certainly that looks old. And of course, anything can be added to a table later. It's tough to date. But the details on the edge, everything about this table make me see no reason that it might not be an 18th century table. So I'm going to take this finish down just with some solvents. I've got to get everything off of here and then apply a new finish. When deciding whether or not to refinish an antique, there's a couple things you got to take into consideration. Number one, the condition of the finish, and in this case, this finish has been ruined by water sitting on it, especially in this area here. And secondly, I don't think this is the original finish. This piece has been repaired many times before, and I'd say that it's probably been refinished a few times before too. I'm going to try stripping this first with just some lacquer thinner. I'll take lacquer thinner and number 1 steel wool and see if this finish will come off of here. Alright, I've let this dry overnight and it looks pretty good, and now I'm going to sand it with 150. I'm just going to sand by hand, just with 150. I'll do 220 later. I just want to clean off the surface. I don't really want to change it that much. Okay, I've sanded this pretty well with 150, and there's still a lot of darkness. I've got a lot of dark spots, which I don't know if they were caused by the burst pipe in the people's home. They might have been there previously. I don't know. A lot of darkness in the grain here. So I'm going to treat this with oxalic acid. I'm not sure if it's my imagination, but I think I can see some lessening of some of these dark spots already. And you won't really know till it's done drying. Okay, the oxalic acid is just about dry, and I'm really thrilled with it. Almost all those black marks came out. They're greatly diminished, so I'm pretty happy with it. Now I'm going to rinse it off. You really want to make sure that you get all this oxalic off, because when I sand it again tomorrow, I don't want to be breathing oxalic acid. I'm real happy with how the tabletop looks wet. There's a little preview of what it's going to look like. I've let this dry overnight. It looks really good, so now I'm going to sand it again really well with just 220 paper. Okay, this top's all sanded now with 220. Now, I noticed when this top came in, besides all the obvious water damage, that it was really bleached out. It must have been in a really sunny location. The top is substantially lighter than the base. And I'm going to put a little paint thinner on here just to see what the color is and compare it to the base. The top is really light, and I can really see a huge difference here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to experiment a little bit. I have some stain here. This is pigmented stain from a local manufacturer. It's just brown stain. It's just called brown. Here's my tung oil finish, and I'm going to add a little stain to the finish. So maybe on the first coat we'll be tinting a little bit. Now bear in mind, my goal is not to match the base. And in fact, in any piece of antique furniture, especially tabletops, the top should always be lighter than the base. But I want to take it a little bit more in that direction. It was a little bit too washed out. I'm going to try a little bit more. Okay, I've let it soak in for a few minutes. And just wipe it off. Alright, let that dry overnight. Alright, that first coat is dried overnight. Doesn't need any sanding or anything, it pretty well soaked in. Now time for the second coat, and I think I'll use a coat with some more of that stain in it. This is what I have left of the tung oil with that brown stain in it. And I'm just going to add more tung oil, not any more stain. I like the color I was seeing. When brushing a coat with stain in it, you've got to put on a really even coat. It can't have streaks that you wouldn't see with the clear finish. I'm anxious to see how this color looks with the base. I think it looks really good. It's the same color as the base, but a little lighter. It's just what I wanted. Alright, now just let this dry overnight. Okay, so this is dried. It feels like it needs sanding. You can't sand a coat that had stain in it. Probably would make that coat uneven or your stain uneven. But luckily with tung oil, you don't have to sand between coats. And I'm just going to blow this off and then apply a coat of clear tung oil. Well, this coat is dried overnight. It looks great. So now I'm going to sand it with 320 gold. I'm all done sanding. I just brushed it off a little bit. I'm going to wipe it off with a paper towel with some paint thinner. And now this coat will be satin tung oil. I'm hoping that this might be my final coat. I'll just decide after it dries. I think I definitely have enough finish on here to protect the surface. I just need to have enough finish so that I can do the final rub out process. Alright, this coat looks great. It's going down really well. And we'll see how it looks tomorrow. Okay, I've let 2 days go by. This coat has dried really well. And I like the sheen. I want to bring up the sheen a little bit with some wax. In the meantime, if you can feel this coat, you'll feel there's lots of little nits all over it. What I'm going to do is take a single edge razor blade that I have in a holder here, and I'm going to very carefully take off a lot of those nits with this razor blade. Doing this with the razor blade is a little difficult because remember, I did not sand this top very much. I did not sand it flat. So I've got to be really careful that I don't cut through the finish. And I'm holding it at a bit of an angle to make sure I can ride with the unevenness. Okay, I've razor bladed the entire tabletop and it feels really smooth now. My next step, I want to wax it, and I'm going to wax it with steel wool, and that'll make it even smoother. So with the wax and steel wool, I'm doing one section at a time. I did this board, now I'm doing this part. And when I feel I've got it really smooth with the steel wool, then I take my rag and really make sure that the wax is even. If the wax dries unevenly, it doesn't buff out. So you've really got to make sure you've got a nice, even, thin, even coat. And now on to the base. Now for the base here, I'm just going to clean it down with some paint thinner and a gray scrubby pad. Some of this paint's a little stubborn. Oh, this is a water-based cleaner. Yeah, that seems to be taking that off. So now I just want to go over it really lightly with some used 320. There's only one area in here where the finish looks a little funky. So I've still got some of the tung oil with the brown stain in it, and I think I'm going to brush a coat of that onto this base. And I hope that that's all it needs. Okay, now I've just got to reattach the base. Alright, now I'm going to go over this base with steel wool and wax, just like I did with the top, with steel wool and wax, just like I did with the top. So there it is, this beautiful antique curly maple tilt top. If you remember, the top was badly damaged from a burst pipe, so it was necessary to refinish it, but I think by doing everything by hand, I've really preserved the look of the table. Gorham, Maine. This is a really nice, small, federal-style Pembroke table. The cabinet maker and designer Thomas Sheraton said that the first of these tables that was ordered was from the Countess of Pembroke. This is a particularly nice one because of the shape of the top. It's got a beautiful shape with these flared out corners. The top is in terrible shape. I'm going to refinish the top, and also I've got to refinish this drawer front too. Always mark which leaf goes where. I'm trying very hard to make sure that the screwdriver stays in the slot. These antique screws have very narrow slots. Also note that I'm keeping track of these screws. I'm going to put them right back in the holes that they came out of. I'm just tightening them up just enough so that they stay there. Okay, we've let this dry overnight. Now I'm going to sand the top and the leaves by hand, just with 150. I want to clean it up, even it out a little bit, and there's this one particular bad mark here. I'm going to sand that. I'm just going to sand lightly, then I'm going to treat it with oxalic acid. Alright, this has sanded up really well. I've just sanded it by hand with 150. The ring is still here. I wasn't even trying to sand it out, but it did lighten up some, which is good. And so now I'm going to treat the entire top with oxalic acid. Really the only reason is to see if we can get that ring out. Let's do the oxalic. So I'm just going to take a glass jar. I've got water just about boiling. Just put in a couple scoops. I'm going to put in enough oxalic till it stops dissolving. Very imprecise measurement. It's not critical. The last few pieces aren't dissolving, so maybe that's enough. So you just brush it on. I might put a little bit of extra on that spot where the ring is. Okay, so I've coated down the whole top. It's pretty easy. And then I just like to go back and pick up any puddles or anything. With oxalic it's not bad, the puddles and stuff, not like bleach, but I still like to smooth them out anyway. Alright, I'll let this dry completely and then I'll rinse it off really well with water. I'll probably do that this evening so that it'll be all dry by tomorrow. We can resume. The tops have dried now. You can see all the oxalic on them. I'm going to take these over to the sink and rinse them off. Okay, I've let this dry overnight. Now I'm going to sand it with 220 and put the first coat of tung oil on it. The main reason I oxaliced it was to get rid of this ring, and it's mostly gone. I can still see a little bit of a shadow of it. I'm going to sand it a little bit. And hopefully when I put the tung oil on it, won't show that much. Oh, good news, this is where the ring was. I can see a little piece of the ring there and a piece of it there, but that's fine, it's no longer a ring. If you remember, the drawer front had some really nasty looking chipping underneath the handle here. But I discovered when I was cleaning the finish off this that it wasn't just the finish that was chipped. There's some terrible gouges here. And I can't do anything about those. I can't sand them out, they're way too deep. So I'm not going to worry about them. But the finish will make everything a uniform color, and it'll look a lot better. Okay, I've let this dry overnight. As you can see, the first coat of oil is really soaked in. But tung oil doesn't require sanding between coats, so I'm just going to go with the second coat. Okay, I'll just let this dry overnight. See how it looks tomorrow. Okay, I've let the second coat dry for actually 2 days. It's nice and dry now, and it didn't soak in nearly as much as the first, but it still soaked in. But there's a lot of little nits and dust and stuff in the top, so I'll smooth it out with some 320 gold before putting on the third coat. Now the first 2 coats I used gloss tung oil. Now this third coat, I'm hoping that after there's just 2 more coats. So even on this third coat, I'm going to put down satin. Okay, that's good. I'm going to let this dry now. I may let it dry for a couple of days. Alright, I've let this coat dry for 48 hours, and it definitely needs another coat. I'm hoping you can see it. Some areas of the tabletop are pretty full, but some areas the grain's still really open. And I'm not trying to make it into a full finish like a piano finish, but I do want it to be more even, and some of these areas in this area here and the leaves are just a little bit too open. So I'm going to sand with 320. I may even just use the block a little bit, really try to cut it down as much as I dare. I begin to see some areas of discoloration, which makes me stop. I don't want to go any further. Looks like I'm getting close to the wood there. Okay, so now we'll just wait till tomorrow and see what we've got. Okay, I let this dry overnight, and I was surprised this morning because the coat on the tabletop looks lousy. It's kind of streaked, like it dried unevenly or something. The leaves look okay. I'm not sure. I thought I had this great coat down. I did, but I'm going to sand it lightly with 500 paper and put another coat on it. Alright, I've let this coat dry now for 2 days, and it looks great. So it's got a few nits and things in the surface, and I'm going to sand it now with 500 gold. Okay, now I'm going to rub the surface with 4/0 steel wool. So there's lots of little shiny spots in the finish because I didn't sand it all the way down, but I'll take out those spots and even it out with the steel wool. Okay, that looks great. So the next step will be for me to take the newspaper off the base and polish it up. The base just really needs the beeswax polish, so I think what I'll do is I'll assemble the top first and then polish everything. And I see here on the underside of the top I've got some drips and runs. I should have taken I should have taken care of those before the final coat, but I'll scrape them off, and then I'm going to go over the whole bottom of the leaves and these areas with the beeswax polish. Alright, so now I'm going to polish the top and then sort of wipe with the same polish. So I'm going to polish the top with the beeswax polish and then go over the whole thing with the wipe off rag. So there we go, this nice little antique Pembroke table. The top just desperately needed to be refinished. It had stains in it and had very little finish on it. This is such a nice table because of the shape of the leaves and the piece of wood at the top. It's a solid mahogany piece, and it's not like it's got any wild figure, but it's got this beautiful knot in it. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's a nice table. It looks pretty good.